Okay, I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. If you would, please stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance. Flag is behind the signature. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, before I ask the superintendent for his report, I'd like to read a brief statement. This is a statement representing myself and no one else. But as we begin down this road to figuring out how we're going to navigate the serious issues surrounding our budget shortfall, I'd like to ask just one thing from everyone. And that is, please don't get involved in or perpetuate finger pointing or name calling or repeating of rumors or information not proven to be factual or from a credible source. Please don't let the demagogues, those clutching sour grapes, and those inclined to see the glass as half empty define who we are. I know that we, and by we, I mean all of us in this community, parents, grandparents, business owners, district staff, and teachers past and present, as well as students past and present, and everyone else out there, if we work together and work with us to find solutions in the short and long terms, we will find light at the end of this tunnel. Having and expressing differences of opinion about important issues is an American tradition. What is also an American tradition is when we're in trouble, we put our differences aside and pull together to find solutions. I hope this meeting is the first step in doing just that, so we can live up to the district's commitment to provide educational excellence for all. Thank you. Mr. Fisk.
My superintendent report is fairly brief, other than just to update you on the opening for the principal of GEMS. It's open. There's no deadline, just open until filled. There may be some discussion from the board about salary points that you may want to give me. There may be discussions that leak into your priorities that you're going to give me around budget impacts, whether we want me to hold on hiring folks. We have some resignations that are already in place, and those holes will normally we'd have them and be looking to fill. Some of them in terms of I'll be able to actually define some that we would just have to wait to see what really comes of the direction that you're going to discuss. And from there, I can certainly hold on those particular pieces. There are some positions at the administrative office. There's one in particular with a retirement that's coming up, planning to fill. It's a big role. So if there's a different direction you want to take that, I want to hear that too. Maybe through some discussionary pieces, you may come to that. But just to give you an idea of those particular pieces that are coming down, there will be some resignations. There will be perhaps a few retirements built in that you'll just see as it comes across your plate as they submit. So that's basically where I am with that.
All right. Okay, moving on to action item. Excuse me. Listed as new business superintendent search process. I'm going to simply open up for discussion. I have some thoughts, but I'd like to hear the thoughts first.
I move that we open up the search for the superintendent.
Have a second? Discussion? Well, as I see it,
Yes, I did.
as I see it in a big picture perspective, we have two routes we can take. And frankly, I don't see why we can't do a hybrid of these combining two. One is to utilize the services offered by the Idaho School Board Association, which are frequently referred to as the ISBA. They offer for a fee basically a two-stage superintendent search process, which we could take advantage of. The other in general process, here we go. B, do you want to go into more detail about that, or save that for a later time?
Yeah, we could go. There's just two different products. The one for 3,900 or around that number is basically the same as the $7,000 package. It's just that the ISBA doesn't come here and isn't as involved in person. But Melissa, you lived through this 2 years ago. So do you want to talk about it as well? Your experience with it?
I'd have to remember which package we went with. Do you remember that? It's so long ago. Casey, you were part of that too.
It was the 39.
Vote for which one we chose. I thought the shorter one had a less expensive one.
They'll put out there, marketing piece of the opens,
Mhm.
posted through
Right.
outreach. And
Perhaps we could tell that to the patrons.
So I'll just read this. They established a search timeline. They determine key qualifications. They advertise the opening and recruit candidates. They review applications. They select they help you with the selection of the finalists. They can conduct, I think the conducting of the reference checks is in the $7,000 one, but they do, yeah, but they do help you conduct interviews for the $4,000, the $3,400 one. And then the selection of superintendent and contract discussion. For the $7,000 one, they'll come here and help you with that discussion. And the other assistances provide the district with sample agendas, including Idaho code sections to use for discussions related to superintendent search, can assist the district with community forum, can provide sample press releases for the district to use related to the superintendent search.
You know, Casey, you can correct me if you disagree, but I think the package that we chose last time worked out well for us. I don't think any of us felt like we needed the additional services.
No, we used the minimal.
Yeah, and I think it worked out just fine. I don't see the need for the additional expense.
What will happen is they'll send us a list, they'll vet them, make sure they're qualified to have their superintendent certificate. Then they'll send us a list, I think, before we got maybe like 10 names. It didn't take us long to whittle down to 2 or 3. If you get one where a guy's changing jobs every year, or perhaps he hasn't worked for several years, you eliminate them and then bring in the last 2 or 3 or 4 for interviews. Maybe whittle them down even a couple more and then could have the second interview.
Yeah, I think we whittled it down to 3 or 4 last time. And usually most of the time during the time frame that this happens, a lot of them are interviewing at multiple districts. So, I mean, there are times that we select a candidate for interview or for their application and they may withdraw it because they might accept somewhere else first.
That, and sometimes they go pretty fast.
Yeah, they do.
Something you want to get on.
Yeah.
Does anybody know how much input they allow from us with respect to what their, for example, their search criteria looks like, where they're going, where they're looking, that sort of thing, or is it pretty well a set pattern when you buy their package or don't?
I'm not sure exactly what you're asking on that. I mean, basically, they will, it's kind of a set pattern that they do. But as far as if they're selecting, I mean, all their selection process is presenting to us, is this person actually qualified for positions? That's the only vetting that they're doing. And then they're sending us the applications, and like Casey said, we go through those and decide if we're interested or not. So it's not like they're looking at it and saying, oh, we don't like that candidate. They're basically going through and saying, do they have everything that they would need to be a superintendent in the state of Idaho?
Well, I guess I'm referring to, thank you, I understand what you said. I guess we can put that up there. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
If we can put it up, I'm primarily interested in item 3 in the list, and for clarity, as I understand this, items 1, 2, 3, and 4 under the what we do is what we're talking about potentially hiring them for. And it's item 3, and I'm going to read it because it's probably not readable out nowadays.
Oh, we work with them on that.
Okay, that's what I want
We
to
work
know.
with them on that.
Well, and I have to tell you, I was just looking at education jobs the last 2 days,
Mhm.
and the superintendent searches for salmon. Oh my gosh, there was like 4 or 5 that came up, and I wasn't even looking. It was like superintendent salmon, salmon channel supply, and it was like, wow, okay. And that was the school board association at work. So it was kind of overwhelming, but yeah.
All right, well, I'd still like to read item 3 in terms of, because we're not spending our money on this. Item 3 says advertise the opening and recruit candidates. Provide a variety of marketing methods to promote the opening around the country. Sounds good. Develop an application form to retrieve the most needed information as candidates apply. And develop a professionally designed brochure that includes the details of the position, the district, and how to apply. This is mailed and emailed to potential candidates through surrounding states. And if everybody will allow me, there's a few more points they make. Post the vacancy and brochure on several websites. Post the information on the ISBA's website, Facebook page, LinkedIn, and so on. Share the information with education leadership departments at various universities. Share the information with the National School Board Association Searchers Group, otherwise known as NASS. Provide information and materials to interested candidates and field all incoming calls and correspondence. Maintain communication with all applicants and maintain electronic application files. So that's a big chunk. That's the chunk as far as I'm concerned of what we'd be asking them to do for us. So that's just for information. Sounds fairly comprehensive.
And I think Melissa's right, Larry, that you guys can manipulate your brochure or that they're going to give you some boilerplate information for you as a school district to manipulate that how you want. They'll give you boilerplate questions for your interview process, and you can again manipulate, take out, keep. So they'll just be a good resource.
And the same with the application that they develop we help them develop it. So we usually meet with them and go through kind of what it is that we want and how we want to do it. And then they'll send back, sure, everybody gets to look it over.
I will mention only because almost immediately after Mr. Fisk announced his plans, I heard from personally email and a phone call or two from people asking if we were going to be putting, just for information, putting this selection process out to a general type of a professional level search. And that's just somebody asked me the question, why would we not? And I honestly didn't have a good answer except to say the qualifications speak for a big chunk of this. But somebody asked me, why would we not look to a professional business person who has perhaps some connection to education or not? That's certainly a plus, obviously. But they were hoping that we wouldn't be, to use my word and not to imply anything, but wouldn't be myopic in terms of, as someone referred to it, not just looking at people who are part of the education establishment. That's, for whatever that's worth. So I'm just sharing that. And if ISBA is willing to work with us on the criteria, sounds like a fair deal.
There'll be statute for the superintendent that must have certification. You perhaps may find someone with that and they're willing to do the work to get that particular certification to meet the accreditation standard for you to have an accredited superintendent in this role. Since you take state funds, you'll answer the Board of Ed, and the Board of Ed will set those statutes or codes for you to follow.
Exactly.
Mr. Fish, sometimes we hire teachers. Can't remember the term, but
Like an alternative certification,
can
yes.
that work for
Yeah,
superintendents?
yeah, you can. A lot of times what will happen is you might find someone, I mean, I'm an example of that. I had to get my Idaho certification. Already had my Montana one, so you get an alternative certification till you meet the requirements.
I think, I've already discussed this. This is, I think they have 3 years.
Yeah.
Is the timeline.
Yeah.
From
that's
date of
right.
hire. And that would be a contractual obligation of theirs.
Right, in this case, there was Danielson evaluation, 3-credit graduate level course you take, a TMT, a math course that was presented at LC College, another 3-credit course. You had to obtain these 6 credits so that you could obtain the certification. So that would be a requirement. If there's someone in Idaho that already has it, they would already have checked those boxes.
Good. So with respect to these motions. Was to open the search first, and then we have a separate in terms of who the contract with. If there's no further discussion, call a vote on B's motion, which is to formally open the search for superintendent. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Sorry.
Did that, your motion include? the
No, it was just to
ISBA?
start the search.
I would entertain a motion with respect to what we've been discussing regarding having the ISBA contracted. I think the proper term is on our behalf to start the search itself.
In the action, I make sure you guys
Choose which
specify
one.
which.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I
I was just going to do it.
don't think I was
That's the 3,000 I wrote.
3,000. Yeah. I would make a motion that we use the ISBA for our superintendent search process and their lower cost package for, I believe it's around 39.
The website,
Does
this,
it have a name? That's what I was looking for.
sure,
Also.
thank you, superintendent search.
That's what I
And
thought.
so we have a
Option 1 or option 2?
option one.
Option
Option
1 is
one.
$37.50. Option 2 is $87.50.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Todd.
My motion, I had amended to put up the words option one.
Option,
And then
3750, 30,750.
Yep. And then Lisa's.
Gotcha. Got it.
any discussion, further discussion? Call for a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Is there somebody here who is going to, for at least 2, willing to take responsibility for getting this process started, keeping the rest of us informed? Or do we want to try and do this as all 5 of us at a time? Well, we're going to have to divide up different things that we do. All of us are not going to be on the ISBA, right? That's what we're thinking. Yeah.
Do you want me to take that on as the
Yeah, we're gonna set up.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to be a part of that as well. So if you and I could work together, I don't know if anybody else wants to. I'm sure you do in some form or fashion. But,
Okay.
Formally speaking, I guess you and I.
Sounds good.
Maybe a question for you guys too, as your discussion about maybe take a stab at a timeline. So that when B calls, they're going to ask for the question of that, when do you want to close this by? I'd be worthy of having that conversation right now. you can certainly say open until filled. You can ask a salary point done on experience so that you're going to negotiate that. So there'll be some things that she's going to get asked when she calls to put that in. So I don't know if it's a discussion for you now to say what is a timeline is up and going in a month, 3 weeks, that type of thing.
If I remember right, Casey, when they come the first time, they go through all of that with us, right? When we're setting up the brochure and what we want, they ask us a question of how long do we want it posted for? How much would the position be listed as? I mean, they basically go with us to set up a listing for the job position. And the first time when they come up to visit with us, I think we get all that. So,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Good. Anything else we might cover on this topic? All right, very well. We'll move on to the discussion item, which is one and only budget impact / levy results. Does anybody here not know what the levy results were? Okay. My understanding is, as a piece of this budget puzzle, just so everybody has the same information, at least with respect from this board, is the SRS funds, which you will hear referred to going forward quite a bit, I imagine, are due to be received by the county at the end of this month. That's what Superintendent Brandt told me. We would then get our share of that the following month in April. So that's the only budget-related up-to-date information I have with respect to what I'll call budget numbers that we haven't previously had a hard picture on, if you understand what I'm saying. So that'll subject up for discussion. This is not an action item. There'll be no vote, no decisions made at this time regarding anything. This is strictly an opportunity for us amongst ourselves to talk in your presence as the law requires and as we are actually very much want to do, so that you can help us as we go. All of us, as you know, on the website have an email address the district provides. We provide a phone number and a snail mail address. I got a lot of emails today with some really interesting suggestions and some very helpful information. It's good to hear. We need to hear. So please communicate with us. If it's a single subject or if it's broad-based, it's all good. We'd like to hear from you. Please contact me, trustee, for your particular zone. That being said, another up for discussion.
I would just say to the board, as I'm hopeful tonight, that you can provide your list of priorities, how you would like to prioritize the particular cuts, things that you are looking at as possible cuts. Those things that you list to me, then Becky and I can go to work on trying to put a price tag. Some of them are going to be fairly entwined with other requirements that you must meet under the law for your budgetary requirements. For instance, can be, well, we're just going to cut all teachers in that 1.7 million. If you cut too many teachers, then it triggers another funding loss because you won't meet your salary-based apportionment. Some of those teachers may be funded out of a federal side. So, or it could even be an aid that meets the maintenance of effort for special education. So there, I just want to provide some examples as you list your priorities of what to look at. There will be other strings attached. By the full loss of now levy number 3, you obviously probably need to make some considerations. In 10 months, you're going to be back at this table setting perhaps another levy amount for March or May. I don't want to project that, but you will be back at the table to figure out perhaps the full amount, which will be around $4 million, I would presume. If you bought that down again with $1 million of SRS, you'd be around 3. This 1.7 piece was the lowest in 13 years. It was about 40% of the need. It wasn't close. It wasn't like we almost made it. Pretty damaging. So what has really happened by another failed levy is we've given up really the full local control to do anything with the dollars. Because the levy amount was your local control to be able to spend it really where you need it. All of the other dollars are all state and federal driven dollars that have attachments. And that's the other particular piece of, we have made our maintenance of effort or maintenance of equity with our COVID related dollars for this year. You couldn't spend any lower amount to use the COVID dollars for the application so that we could have the maintenance of equity for special ed, poverty, low social economics. There's all sorts of lists that go with that. So as we held in place, if the maintenance of effort falls below what we've done previous, you can't use the dollars meant for COVID to apply, because that's what we would have done with levy dollars to support those pieces. So I only share this with you because I do want to hear your priorities moving forward. There are some conditional pieces that may get in the way of some of your thoughts. So I'll leave it at that and listen to what you have to say around how you'd like to prioritize things moving forward.
If I may start the discussion, I would renew my request for any budget pictures, I'll call them, to be presented in a manner that is easily understood by anybody looking at them without the assistance of accounting professionals. That being said, I'm wondering if it wouldn't be possible, if I understood what you're saying, and I think I do, that there's what I'll call, there's an amount of money, whatever that might be, for which we don't have any discretion over how we spend it. It is whatever the source might be, it's still the same outcome. We're required by law, statute, other obligations to spend this money in this way. And where I'd like to start is by getting what I'll refer to as a baseline. What do we have? And assuming we don't change anything exactly with respect to what our core obligations are, what can we fund right now with no changes? That's what I need to see. And I imagine there might be a couple of people who would like to see that as well. So again, I'm hopeful that could be presented in a format that is charts and graphs and things that people can visualize, and not just listings of numbers and categories and things that are hard for us non-accountant types to get our heads around.
So you would like a pictorial review. Would you state that again, please?
Sure, it's I'd like it to be some kind of baseline of what exactly our budget will allow us to do right now with no changes, so that we can have a picture of what we're looking at. Okay, I'm hoping that the way that that's presented is in a manner by using charts and graphs that will allow us to understand, pretty much anybody understand what we're looking at without the use of jargon, without the use of numbering systems and categorization that's complicated and needs to be explained by someone else. It shouldn't be. I understand the complexity of what I'm asking. I do. It's not a snap your fingers kind of a thing. But I'd appreciate any effort that can be made in that direction so that we can have the most, what I'll call, comprehensive involvement. And I don't see how we're going to be able to do that without presenting such a model or such a picture.
Larry, would a colored copy of my presentation of the 8 slides help?
I am willing to look at anything.
Print it out?
I'm willing to look at anything, so long as it's via our business manager and has her credentialing, since she's the lady in charge of the numbers. That's our.
Can the board speak to some priorities for us that you would like to see? Obviously, trying to get to the 1.7 cut margin of things that, hey, we're going to start here in terms of a cut. I'll just pose this question. Do you want to eliminate some teachers through well, let's just say staff in general through retirements or resignations. And that's a number I don't know.
Todd,
Or-
I think we'd like to hear from the administrators who run this district, so like the principals and the superintendent. Do you have something to present with your suggestions?
I do not,
with
because
monetary?
our administrators would like to hear what the priorities are by our board first. What are your priorities to keep or
But I know
cut?
you have a list in front of you that the principals combined.
So, Todd,
Those are my general notes.
so I noticed like down at CB, we have like, I don't know, 6, 7 buses that just sit.
Okay.
Do I get rid of them? Do we sell them?
Or maybe just not buy
Can we
new
help
ones.
offset some? Would that help?
So there will be a complication with transportation budgets. We can't speak immediately to say, hey, you might save 200,000 to put it towards it. I understand the question, but
Yeah.
that can be something we can look into.
Right, that might be
as a priority.
$2,500
Right.
or it might be $5,000 a bus, but I mean, if we're not using them and they're depreciated out all the way, is it possible to do an inventory of the buses that are not in use and get rid of them and it might offset something?
I cannot, but could you tell me again what you believe to be the number of buses?
Well, she
that are
thought
not
3 or 4
used?
down there that might not be
I
in
just didn't
service.
capture it, sorry.
Oh, I thought maybe there was 6 down at CB that are not in use. And I'm not sure how many are at Grangeville.
Sure.
Maybe about the same, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, we certainly.
Another, for instance, could be things like, the board has talked a lot about 60-day cash flow. It's around $2 million. You want to move it to 45 days and save $250,000. These are just estimated numbers. Does the board want to cut all extracurricular activities? No sports. And if you do that, no FFA, no drama, no extra, but are you going to then say, but Todd, we'll allow them to fundraise for it? The cost of each particular sport is X, and we would allow that. Or does the board want to prioritize no extracurricular unless all of the entire amount is fundraised by the entire district, A to Z? So softball right now doesn't get cut because nobody can buy another candy bar again. Versus football is going to start and head on in the fall, and they get the momentum through the summer. Talking to Dad today, they did Cords of Wood here 7 or 8 years ago, I think. And so those are the particular pieces of what is the priorities that you see that you want to maximize or minimize first. I can give you rough estimate numbers. Let's say you put $50,000 ahead on a teacher. 10 teachers, there's a multiplier. I give or take that, these are average numbers, and they don't all fit into one little box, but you know that your newest, lowest teachers more than likely are going to be impacted by cuts first. You all received today, and B has shared this 4-day school week. I can conservatively say 3 to 4% savings overall. It's not 20% from what I've read. One day you get cut 20%, but and maybe it's better. These are going to things that you will all live through. If you went to a 4-day school week and say, let's say you saved 3% on the whole budget of 12 million, and there was a $360,000 savings, that could be an area you say, well, but we haven't rooted that out. I mean, these are some guesses that you're going to be traveling down if that's a priority.
I, for one, would like to see an actual estimation on it, because I had several people just today, and it comes up pretty frequently. It's an interest of people, and maybe we can make a decision in part, including 4-day school week. So seems to be a good question. I think we need to address specifically.
Can I speak? So there was a national study done it's called Analyzing the Claims of Proponents of the 4-day School Week. And right here it says, does it save districts money? It would save, it would be less than 5%. But at this point, 4% is what, $560,000? So I think doing something like that is a necessity. We can't start cutting teachers. And this would be my first priority, and it could be temporary.
So you're
It's
saying
just
that a priority would be a look at a 4-day week for, and if you use, I use a conservative number of 3%. She said maybe to 5. That's what you won't know until you're up and going.
Right.
So the board may have to conservatively say, if we went with 3 and we moved down that road, at the end of the next year, you'll have plenty of data to say, you know, hopefully you would be lower than 3, right? That would be, I don't know. There are other particular pieces around. We know, I believe B has shared this in some presentation. There can be some advantages to a 4-day week. A lot of it is surrounds parents and sports, putting things on Fridays when it's travel, it's not interrupting. It's generally a bigger impact to our high school kids that are having to leave school early. That is lessened. So, but there are components of that feel it impacts learning negatively. So that you can pull that up and read both sides of that. I have not worked in a system like that, so I cannot speak to it. Though these priorities are around, another one could be, Todd, we want to try and preserve the teaching at all costs. We just kind of alluded to that before we do anything else, or you all are getting, I'm certain you're getting it because I'm tagged along with the optics of the failure. I mean, we've got things, some people are ready to board up certain windows. I don't think you're there for any of that particular piece, but continued failed levies will have other particular work on your part. If you're 1 year from now running, I'll just say you're gonna need 4 and you're running at 3 because you can put $1 million. I'm just thinking that you take the $1 million from SRS next year and buy it down again. My crystal ball would be if you can't get through 1.7, I don't know what that's some of the thinking in your guy, I would assume in your mind of we're going to be just back here really rather quickly again. And there, I'll also toss out as an option right now, you could run it again in May. I think it should be pointed out to the board that you have an option up to March 18th to turn around and run it again. We had this conversation a year ago. It did not go anywhere. But I feel I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that that is an option. And probably the other thing you've all heard too is, you know, this team of individuals, these people are hurting. Every person on our team is hurting, and they're going to need to know what your priorities are to move forward. And I can try and lay those out with the price tag. The 4-day week I can work on, try and get a budgetary picture for that. But even in B's quick figure, he said around 500,000 plus. 5% at 12 million is $600,000. So at 1.7, you got 1.1 left. Right? You take we're roughly 250,000 extracurricular activities. Mainly what you're saving there, right, is the big part of that is busing.
And
The board may say, parents, you're going to do what we've done this year. A lot of that has been around. We just haven't had drivers. Board might say, we want to cut that, but we want it to go and we'll allow fundraising. If you can't fund it. These are just questions I'm throwing at you for you guys to have to consider. If softball doesn't get enough to go, is it canceled? Yes, it is canceled. If football, football is a bigger sport that takes more equipment, a little more money, you're gonna divide it by the number. These are things that I know there's people in this audience that coach step up and donate their whole coaching stipend just so they can be out there with these kids. So those are particular pieces. I talked about cash flow idea. This goes against Becky's grain. I know if we can get it down to 45 days, it makes things tough for us in those months where we're trying to make ends meet, but if we find 250,000. Again, these are gross estimated numbers. For your consideration. And so that's why I asked, what are your priorities? What do you want to see? We're here. The levy failed. We're a school district that needs it. And we're one of, I'm told, just a couple that failed in the whole state. I know that there was a lot of information that I received that this is what will get the legislature kind of off the
Help them pay attention.
yeah,
Yeah.
that we got to change the funding model. It's going to come at an expense to our communities in a big way. And I just don't know if 2 or 3 school districts is enough of a trigger when 90+% of all the others passed. And I'm not talking about bond issues. There were a number of schools that did not pass their bonds, but almost the majority, a large majority, passed their supplemental levies. So, and I'm sure you're up to speed on some of that data. And the hard thing again is, as you are making these priorities and considerations, the really tough reminder is in 10 months, it's Christmas, and you're talking about, hardly even believe Christmas, but you're going to be talking about it again and trying to set a number, what that looks like. And if these calculations are correct, let's say from this national average on a 4-day week, we're going to now have to, if it's a priority tonight, we're going to have to go back and revamp an entire calendar you just adopted last month. We're going to have to make certain we meet the minutes.
What's really nice about that
So
is
you-
Elk City's already on a 4-day.
We already have
So
an
we
outline,
could
but
just
you have a
switch it.
high school commitment that's a lot more minutes than it is for an elementary school. You don't have much wiggle room in the realm of your seniors. Our seniors, of course, we know where all those seniors want to be, not here, but they only have about a 3 or I think it's about a 4-day window, which is really built around our snow closures. So when you say, maybe you may say we find it through furlough, which rides the backs of every person in this district. It's tough. It can be tough on their families to give up a week of pay. You're going to have to do something in terms of, if the priority becomes, we are not going to give up learning for our kids, which would be my priority. This might be how we're going to have to squeeze it.
I think Casey has mentioned, and I know I've been told that by numerous superintendents of other districts that have gone to a 4-day week. We had talked, it's been many, many years ago, about trying to create a technical education high school for the area, potentially, especially where some of the school districts had 4-day weeks. You know, could they send their students to that on that day? Those kinds of things. And the majority of the administrators that I talked to told me, and Casey's expressed similar sentiments, that the 4-day week really didn't save them that much money.
When I got on the board, there was 2 things I wanted to address. I have neighbors that complain that they see, 2 or 3 buses coming up Sally Ann. One goes this way, one goes that way. So I thought maybe we could save money getting rid of our buses and hiring a bus company. So I went around. I went to Craigmont first. There was a lady superintendent. I don't know if she's still there. She was very informative. She says, don't sell your buses. She says, I know your buses. You've got very nice buses. And what happens is we sold our buses and we hired, is it Harlow? Harlow? And she says, they're terrible. Their driver don't show up. The superintendent gets a call. Hey, if you got somebody to drive the bus for Route 3, go ahead. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. or their buses are always broke down. So she says, don't sell your buses. The second thing was a 4-day workday, because I thought, well, we're going to save a lot of money. We're going to save 20%. 1 day out of 5 is 20%. She told me, and I also went to Orfino and I also went to Cami, they all told me, you're not going to say what's projected. And the reason is because nobody sticks with it. Okay, the salaried people, they're happy to have Friday off or Monday. Somebody said take Monday off because rather than Friday, because, you know, let me get this straight. Because the doctors and stuff are, a lot of them take Friday off anymore. So don't take Friday off, or do take Friday off and go to work on Monday. You're not understanding me? Let me explain myself.
I think you just said it backwards.
Okay. And the second thing they says is you're not going to save any money. I don't care what's projected. And they all told me this. I talked to a superintendent today. The reason is it looks great. I thought, wow, we're going to save 20% on busing. No, we get reimbursed for what we do. So there's no savings on buses. There's no savings
We get
on,
reimbursed 75%.
there's no savings, because what happens is, you know, the salaried certified people, they're happy. They're off on Friday or Monday, whatever. But what about the other people? There's bus drivers that aren't going to qualify for their 20 hours, so they're not going to get their insurance. They're going to be upset. There are parapros that get paid by the hour. And so what do? They're going to come in on the Friday or the Monday, whatever the day off, because they're going to say, well, we got to help prepare. We got this to do. We got that to do, because they just got cut 20% of their salary. The same with the janitorial maintenance people. They come in, they say, well, you know, there's no kids in school today, so this is a wonderful day to do a deep clean or to get things cleaned. So you're still paying your parapros that are coming in. You're still paying your janitors. And she says the superintendent I talked to today says, you know what? On Fridays, which is the day we take off, I can't be in that school and tell you that school isn't there. And the reason is because the secretaries are there. They have to get caught up. The reason is because they want paid for it. The janitors are there. The reason is they want paid for it. The parapros are there working because they want paid for it. And it goes on and on and on. There is no savings. And you can't blame them. All of a sudden, you just tell people that they're getting cut 20%, they're going to think up reasons to go in. The superintendent I talked to today, they said, well, last year we projected we were going to save $70,000. He says, I don't think we saved anything because we hadn't factored in all the hourly people that are going to be here on Fridays. And he says, the kids are here anyway, especially during the winter. He says, I can't walk through a school on a Friday and tell you any difference than the other days because they have nothing to do. So they come in, we allow them to get on their computers, do whatever they're going to do, or they're in the gymnasium, they're playing ball, or they're on the weight benches doing this. The same ones told me the whole thing. You can project whatever you want. But he says, I'm telling you, there is no savings on a 4-day work school week. What is happening though, is you're going to add 20 minutes to every day. So 20 minutes times 4, that's 80 minutes, right? So you're adding an hour and 10 minutes to the week, but you're taking away the 7 or 8 hours, 6 hours, whatever it is. So what you're doing is cutting your kids' education by 20%. There's no other way to look at it. Plus, I was told, I've never been a teacher, but I'm a human and I'm out working. I can do pretty good till about, later in the afternoon, and then I tuck her out. I had a teacher call me today, a former teacher. She says, I can tell you, I retired after 30 years teaching. She says, I can tell you that the last part of the day is very ineffective. The kids are squirmy, they're tired, they don't want to work, the teachers are tired. So to add 20 minutes to each day and think you're going to make up a whole day, all you're doing is damaging your kids. You're not doing them a favor. If you think you can teach a kid the last part of the day, 80 minutes worth in 4 days, what they're going to learn on a whole nother day, why then you've got some kind of ulterior motive for wanting to go to a 4-day work day, 4-day work week. So
Hey,
I just can't hardly imagine anybody that I see all these signs up and down Grangeville, kids are our future, or save the kids or something. I just can't imagine an educator that wants to cut out a whole day's education for our kids. To me, that's just dumbing down education even further.
Casey,
One more thing before I'm done, and then you can talk. Tomorrow night at Green Creek at 5 o'clock, every cutthroat politician that's running in the state on the Republican side is going to be at a meeting. I'm going to be there. And I'm going to ask where the 1.2 billion is that we were promised. Why they're not doing education. They've had several things, let's raise this thing a penny or 2 pennies on sales tax. I'd like to see this many people out in front in a very polite way, holding up signs and approaching these politicians when they come out, or you can come in, it's a public meeting. Ask them, what their problem is with funding education.
Excuse me, real quick, it's not a public meeting. It's, you have to buy a ticket to get in. It's the Republican Lincoln Day dinner, and all the candidates are going to be there pitching their candidacy. So it's not a public meeting, but nothing says you can't be out front. But I'm told 14 to 16 candidates of different offices are going to be there. So he's right, it's a big opportunity.
I would like to see this big of a group that's standing outside and, asking what the deal is. You promised us $1.2 billion. Where is it? What's wrong with funding education? Go ahead, B.
Casey, the school in your zone is a 4-day week currently and has been for 5 years or so. I don't know exactly how long, but so if you're worried about the academics of the children that go to a 4-day week, why is Elk City on a 4-day week?
Well, I think it's just a little bit different up there. When it went to a 4-day week, you know how many kids they had? 3. They just haven't changed back.
All right, on a different note, if you don't mind, before I forget to ask this, just for the record, does the district own any surplus land or buildings that aren't currently being used that we may look at liquidating?
There is a piece of surplus land that we dealt with down by Cammy. We spent 7 or 8 months on it. It will not get you out of this hole.
I don't expect it to be
It's
a magic
not.
bullet. I'm just asking.
I was hoping to tell you there's 500 acres right next to,
The river.
right next to the
River
river.
frontage.
Yeah, but it isn't. It was a small piece of land that was gifted many years ago. It's taken a lot of effort to unravel the title, how it became. And at the end of the day, I think we talked about under 15,000, 10,000. But
It's a
But
worse
how many
piece of
years
what we
ago?
thought.
How
I
long
wouldn't
ago
look
was
at
that?
it.
Yeah,
It's a steep hillside.
yeah,
it was in the last year.
no, and it's really an odd piece. In case you haven't looked at it, it's right on the border of Cammy and our district out on 7 Mile.
It's the hillside right across from Leroy Howe's junkyard.
Oh,
Excuse me, salvage yard. Leroy's a good guy.
So in terms of anything else, Mr. Dunn, I don't know.
There is, okay.
We did have somebody email us that we did purchase a basketball court at Gems from the church, the Christian church. And we would talk to them about possibly selling it back to the church. But that's something right at Gems.
It's on the corner of, what was that, 2nd Street, and it's just a little,
It's like 2 lots, maybe.
and that's
Purchased
news.
a basketball court from a church
That's what I was told
by whom?
by the Sanchez's who are a part of that church.
I haven't heard any of that myself, but it's very possible.
I don't know. I'm just, he asked about land and I had heard that, so I don't know.
Didn't go through anything.
In the last 30 years.
If you could get that done and by August, you'd be at 1.6.
Right. Joe, I'd like to hear from you as principal or Ty.
They can.
If we ask them, they can.
It's public,
Yeah, we can't do that.
public meeting, we don't do that.
I'm curious, you guys are talking about, you'd like to see some numbers or information, from Becky. Casey and Becky and Todd and I spent a lot of time, pretty involved in meetings. What was presented to everybody at the January meeting. And then we decided that, we needed to go after 1.7 million. All three of you felt like we did not want to do a levy. Casey, I'm curious, you spent a lot of time in those budget meetings. Where was the 1.7 that you didn't want to ask the public for going to come from? Or after listening through that presentation, what did you think we wouldn't want to spend? We had what, 3 at least hour and a half long meetings going through the budget in detail where if you didn't, want us to even run a levy, where were we getting that $1.7 million from?
I'm still waiting to see how much we're gonna get from the governor before I'm.
Also, closer. I actually did vote. So
You said the voters could answer, but you said you didn't really want to.
we really want to run a levy because here we are,
Well,
3 years in a row.
No, I'm just asking. If we weren't going to run a levy, what I'm asking, because you were saying these things, what was your thoughts of what we would do instead?
Well, I think maybe, probably sort of like if we look at some class sizes, consolidate maybe. I heard a lot of people, and I'm gonna address it because you're all thinking it. Let's get rid of CV and let's get rid of Elk City. That's what everybody's thinking, right? Well, I just want to let you know that I don't think that's a grand idea. Because if you take away CV from Grangeville or Grangeville from CV, that means that you're going to have a smaller school yet, and the state is not going to give you as much money either way. So the bigger you are, the more kids you have, the more money you get. So maybe that'll just clarify some emails that maybe have pondered around.
So if Clearwater Valley joined GHS, Clearwater Valley High School joined GHS, we would get more money?
No, we're still one district.
Actually lose money
You'll
Lose
lose money.
money.
because your apportionment comes for, you get money based off of having 2 high schools in your district. And one of the mechanisms for that is a school that's more than 25 miles away from your district office helps trigger part of that funding.
What is that
So
amount?
It's called a separate school funding and it's driven on the units.
What do we get currently from that?
I'll put that on the list.
But would that,
So it'd be a double whammy. I mean, you shut it, you would lose that money.
Right, and it's just like Elk City. You can't shut Elk City down because they're actually a money maker.
I'd like to see that as well.
Really, but they do generate.
They generate,
It's called separate school funding, where in the schools, as I explained, that are X number of miles away from the district administrative unit, which is Grangeville schools. They're funded separately, not all jammed into one spaghetti pot. So there is more funding, more units driven by that one than if you were to just consolidate, bring everybody into one.
I mean, yeah, minus the fact that that's gonna be a lot of more transportation per day, because you got kids live all the way in Lowell.
Right, and they could potentially go to CAMI. I'm just throwing out options, or they could do IDLA or some sort of alternative schooling, homeschooling, something like that.
But then you lose their money. you know, if
So
you
that's
lose
why
it.
I would like to also request the revenue and expenditures, just the bottom line from each building for the 21-22 year.
You know, I would want to look at that. I believe that's part of our annual report to the State Department of Education. They split everything out by building, and
So could you compile those numbers for us from that report?
you can look at that yourself on the State Department.
I have it printed out at home. I just thought it might be better, because sometimes if I find things online, then it's not the right number. So I just wanted to make sure I got the right number.
I just don't have time to do that for you.
Okay.
I think we looked at quite a bit in detail, and Casey, you could speak to this as well. Was it the last levy failure or the one before we looked at Elk City that was brought up? And it definitely 100% did not save any money to close that school. It was actually, from a revenue standpoint, detrimental.
I was always the impression, Mrs. Hogg says no, but I was always under the impression that that made us just a little bit of money.
Yeah, that's what
At
I'm
least
saying.
broke
That's
even.
to our benefit. Don't look
As
at
I
it that way.
recall, the Old City School generates 1 unit, no matter how many students are there. However, it's also served by all the district-wide personnel. So you can't just look at, I versus Oak City, I teach here. You see what I'm saying? There are other costs to be factored in for every location, and the district, I don't know quite how to convey this concept, but we do not make money off of anything. Our schools are funded based on state formulas, driven off of student attendance, or in this case, for this coming year, it will be student, how do I say, FTE, student enrollment, FTE. It's not like you can shut down or sever one limb from the body and expect the body to still function at that second level. Is that an appropriate?
I think so.
Right, we're just talking about a school district though with 6 different buildings, and there are fiscal tendencies in each building. So expenditures, revenue, who makes, which ones are actually,
To do
I'd like
that,
to see the in and out, that's all.
well, I don't know how.
That's fine, I'll look it up, I have it.
Well, we can certainly provide the number of units that the district generates, but like I said, even though Elk City generates a unit based on that separate funding formula, it probably isn't taking into account the school site services, the nursing services, all that extra stuff that it takes to run that school.
Right, but we could maybe take a percentage of
Yes,
their
that's what I'm
salary.
getting at. You can do allocations and percentages and allocations to the group. At the end of the day, the only thing that we allocate out to the buildings is their M&M supply for instruction. And we do an allocation for extracurricular, but that's not done at the building level. It's done at the community. Aside from those two things.
Becky, correct me if I'm wrong, but kids aren't calculated this year by minutes,
Oh, yeah.
correct? They're by
They
enrollment.
just- So, State Board of Ed just passed a rule that for the year we're currently in, which started based on average daily attendance, so 2.5 hours or 4 hours in the state.
In a core class, right?
Any class,
Any class.
any attendance that we're offering, or has nothing to do with it. So we began the year with those instructions, and then it was just recently, the State Board of Ed said, oh, we're we're going back, we're allowing you to use enrollment FTE for the current year and next.
So how does that work? Because you used to get paid for minutes in the seat, and now we're gonna get paid enrollment.
Based
So it's in
on
a-
enrollment FTE. So if your child is enrolled in a CV school, but also taking classes from Joe Bob's virtual high school in wherever, then that FTE, which can only total one,
Yeah.
is split between those two schools based on the percentage of the kids' time enrolled in Joe Bob's virtual school versus the other.
So
It just
It-
doesn't limit it down to, it actually generates more units, but typically than that unit.
So you're talking like all your IDLA classes as well because they're virtual,
The
or?
IDLA is a little bit of a different beast. It's not.
It's going to provide better funding for you, the district, with this new formula. The legislature is not willing to make it permanent. They were willing, and these were due to COVID impacts. Kids that we weren't able to account for because they were at home doing, maybe learning from the computer with one of our teachers. Could be even packet learning, but they weren't in their seat at school, right? They were home. And so this has helped us to procure better funding. But just listening to the legislature, they may move it back because they know it comes with a price tag.
So when will we know if that was more or less? Well, because you used to get paid for minutes in the seat, right? And now you're getting paid a straight fee for,
It's not that simple. The minutes in the seat that you refer to is really average daily attendance formula, in which if a student is present for 2.5 hours, half a day, if they're present for 4 hours, full day, and that average daily attendance is then aggregated for the year and blah, blah, blah. That's what drives the number of units.
okay, how much do we get per kid? Per kid.
You don't.
So CV is different than Grangeville's per units, is that?
The number of units that are generated in each one of our schools depends on, let's use enrollment FTE. That's
Okay.
what we're doing now.
Yep.
And that will drive the number of units.
Okay.
Am I missing?
It's not
something?
different by high school.
No,
It's
well,
all
it's
one
based
page.
on size, it's based on size, and it's based on location. If you're part of the administrative fold, it's one, I can show you the table. Oh, I'm not sure how that plays into your overall goals.
Obviously, a priority that I'm hearing, Lacey, is not this closure piece that people have given you some ideas around. Is not a priority by this board. So, the 4-day week piece to try
I'd like
and,
to talk about that a little more. If we can.
okay, we, I think, rooted out the high school funding piece. You know that there's units that go with that. We're going to check the busing piece to see if there's some allocations, but these particular pieces might get you somewhere, not 1/7. So what are other priorities that you want us to look at and consider?
Well, you're calling them priorities, and I'm not sure that's.
Or how about a list for us to,
Yeah, I
Give
think
you
I think that's
Yeah,
better
do you
use
guys
of
have that?
language. Consideration, exactly. I don't think, excuse me a second, I don't think that there's anybody here that's has a priority of reducing anything any more than we absolutely have to. For example, as I was listening to the conversations here, I'm just wondering, well, what would it look like if we did a 4-day school week and we implemented some sort of a furlough program? I've had the, not being sarcastic, I had the pleasure of being furloughed a few times and going through that with previous employment from a government agency on more than one occasion. And I understand how uncomfortable that is. But it was presented to us by our union at that time. If we don't do that, then we're just gonna start whacking staff off at 10% levels. And so there's a balance to be had in everything. That's my basic argument. So I'm hoping we can get to a point where we find there's no magic bullet out there. I think we by now have made that clear. I certainly don't see one. And so I'm just hoping that we can be open to ideas and not immediately dismiss things because of information that we ourselves haven't seen presented to us from a factual basis for our particular circumstance, where we live, and from our books. All right. That being said, Mr. Fisk, I would ask that because you are the person best with your finger on the pulse of what's going on day to day in this school from an overall perspective, I am interested in knowing not necessarily a recommendation, but your, call them musings, I don't care, how you think for example, in fact, I'll just make this a request. I'd be interested in your musings as to how you think our numbers would look implementing some sort of furlough program along with a 4-day schedule. I think it's the combinations that are going to get us where we need to be. And I don't see that that's not a bad place to start. That's been
I'm sorry, 40-week plus.
4-day week
Furlough.
plus a furlough program, not asking for a recommendation. I understand politically that's somehow off limits, but you know, what if pick 1 day a month, 2 days, and just break it out and let's see it. Why not? Right? That's where I'd like to start.
Is kindergarten funded full days? No.
No.
So it has not gone through. That could be another consideration by you that, you know, one of the great things Mountain View School District has done very forward thinking a number of years ago that he tackled all day kindergarten is a terrific standard in education. And I don't know how long ago it happened here, but the framers of that time, thumbs up.
Yeah.
You could eliminate half, you move it back to half day and have that savings. It is in the legislature right now to fund all day kindergarten.
Right. I was just
We
curious if
haven't,
it's still
it's coming with some strings and it's back and forth. We'll continue to follow it. So 2 things could happen. One is if they did fund it, the district would realize some savings with more funding for their funding the half day that we have self-funded for a number of years. If they don't, then the board could opt to say, well, we're going to move it to half day because that's all we get reimbursed for. And you would have that savings. I can figure out what that savings would be for half day kindergarten. It's going to, you could, a round number, if a teacher is $50,000 as just a number, and one says that, okay, well, if I'm just half-time, I'm going to save 25,000. If there are 5 classrooms of that, we'll save a little over $100,000, give or take. There's supplies. These are again just rough estimates for you to get at a number so that you can balance your budget with this loss. There are bigger there's going to be bigger slices to get, and at the end of the day, you're alluding to personnel.
If I could, real quick, we've got 15 minutes left in this scheduled meeting, just for everybody's information. Becky, could I get a summary of what you understand you've been asked for to this point in time now? But I want to make sure, because frankly, I don't know if anybody wants to come back and think they're going to get X and we don't get X, and just try to keep
What's
everybody.
your understanding? of what-
I haven't been typing and keeping track of everything.
I've got some lists I
Okay,
can
I'm
maybe
just-
throw
I'm
out.
just
We're
looking
going to
for-
look at the buses and see
Yeah,
what that may look like. It could provide some savings, but any amount could help.
Can you ask the bus barn to maybe look at consolidating routes?
We've just done that up here. We just did that, eliminated 2 routes. There, you know, Mr. Smith said that some buses are passing each other. They turn around, Harpster grade. That is correct. You cannot. There are strict mandates in the federal portion of transportation of even a bus going into the other land, so to speak. So we're governed by that. It isn't something that we think would be great for us. It's what the requirements are. But I won't jump into the route part, but I'll look at that part. The other one is a 4-day school week. I'll do a little more research. I've heard what Mr. Smith has said, and I certainly have heard what Ms. Edwards has said. So
I have more if you want.
did you want to share it, or did you want to just send it to me?
Well, I have more about that, but I have some other ideas possibly.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to hear. Furlough days, trying to get an equivalent of what we spend per, just to finish this list. You basically, what is a day of salary cost Mountain View School District? And again, there are, Becky laughs a little bit at me, but I kind of get this big grandiose number, and then she says, well, Todd, remember, we don't pay that person out of the general fund, or we don't, so the number might be a little higher. But let's say we spend $50,000 a day for salaries, entire district. A little over $1 million a month. It's kind of how you come up with that. So divide roughly 20 days minus the weekends in a month, and that's kind of how the number materializes, a big average. If you had $50,000 a day and you furloughed 5 days, you save $250,000 on the backs of everybody in this district. Could you titrate it out? I would imagine the board would say, let's put one in September and October, and it wouldn't all happen in 1 week. The board may say, tackle some professional development days, so it doesn't impact kid learning days. Well, some of those. There could be some of those particular pieces, so we'll try and get a more accurate number. Hopefully I'm not super way off, but you jumped into my head on that. The other question a lot of people in here want to know, are these kids going to have any extracurricular activities? I mean, we're going to do all these other things and not look at extracurricular activities? So I'd like you to give me some direction on that tonight too.
I'd like to cut busing to sports activities.
And I'd like to ask everybody the whole thing. I interrupted.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I do.
Good.
When we were talking about the kindergarten piece, we were talking about the cost savings to going to a half day. I just want to clarify, Todd, am I thinking correct that because our teachers are teaching kindergarten and first grade at the same time, it's not like you're removing half their position, because it's not. I mean, it's not a half a day. I mean, because they're doing both at the same time.
Right. There would have to be all sorts of restructuring for that. So probably would move into keeping a kindergarten teacher with an AM and a PM schedule, 2 half-day pieces, and then you would, unless I'm sitting down with those principals to say what would be it would just be a sole first grade. You would have to be restructuring some of those particular pieces.
So how much do you estimate the half day from the state would help?
I have no idea. Yeah, that's what we'll check into.
If I can offer a little bit there.
Yeah.
So there have been several versions of funding full day kindergarten that have been rolled up into a generic average man's language of, oh, we're going to increase funding from half day to full day. I don't believe that is coming through to my vision. From what I understand, the most recent thing that has been passed was a version whereby literacy funding, which we're already receiving, has been increased for next year. Don't have that number yet for us, but that would be available to dip into if you wish to apply it toward kindergarten, as opposed to applying it toward additional staffing or staffing to help those K-3 students who aren't scoring proficiently on the IEP indicator, which is the testing mechanism that drives the literacy funding. So stated another way, only if your students in K-3 are doing poorly do you receive literacy funding. It's being increased for next year. And one of the uses that we've always had available to us with literacy funding is to apply it toward words on.
Can I clarify something?
I'm gonna try and not forget anybody. I think Lacey.
Oh,
go
You
ahead.
good? All right,
Go ahead.
go.
Go ahead.
Go,
Well,
Casey.
I just confuse people. The recommendation was if you did go to a 4-day, take Monday off and not Friday, because Friday the doctors are gone, the dentists are gone. I know my doctor's gone on Fridays, my dentist is gone on Fridays, my eye doctor is gone on Fridays, and so is the local chiropractor. So I think it's a moot point. I hope we don't go there, but if you did, that recommendation was take Monday off and not Friday. And as far as the 4-day work, I have to ask, maybe you'll save money. People I talked to said you wouldn't, but at what cost are you willing to cut 20% of your kids' education?
Do you have any suggestions?
Beyond what we've been talking about,
You're right. Did you come with any, like any ideas?
the issues that I wanted to bring up have been brought up so far.
Go ahead, I'll let you speak
I've already
first.
spoken to them.
I got-
I want to look at a 4-day school week. I want to see actual numbers. I understand Casey's point, and it wasn't one that I had considered, but it's hard running organizations where there is what I'll say is an appreciable amount of latitude given to employees to do things. And I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying that's just the real world. And that's what Casey's talking about, is the real world and how things fall out. If in fact, I think if we're going to, and I'm sure I'm more hardline than a lot of people would like, but if we're going to do such a thing, then I think come down and say that this school is not open, it's not open. Okay, it doesn't make much sense. I mean, I'm not going to give any examples. That's the hard choices that we're going to have to make. We either close it or we don't, and don't tell people that we are when we're not. That sort of thing. So other than that, I'm interested in looking at a graduated furlough schedule in combination with a 4-day school week. And I am not there yet, only because I don't know that we need to be, but I'm also interested in looking at pay for play sports. That was a big element. It's an element that has a lot of latitude and a lot of moving pieces, and I like the idea that it involves more of the community and what this community wants and values and all those types of elements. And so those are basically my big highlights. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I don't want to see sports cut at all, because I think bad things are gonna happen if we do. You won't have to make cuts in all actuality. I think because people will pick their kids up and they'll leave. And then you won't have kids in classrooms to even fill. So I mean, most of the time, you'll be sitting here with half empty classrooms as it is. But I think if we are going to do the pay for play, it's gonna go straight across the board, right?
Well, we do that now.
We do. We pay $82 per sport, maybe $81 per sport, $92 per sport. I pay both my kids together, so it's usually a little more than that.
Different rates for the high school.
But-
But what do you mean by
All sports,
All sports,
everything.
whatever grade,
all of them, yeah, I think,
individually, no 3 first?
no, no, not,
What kind of raise are you anticipating? What do you want to see?
oh, raise, I don't say raise.
Increase to.
Oh, increase, I don't know, that's kind of what I was waiting for, maybe to see what how much are we gonna have to raise?
Well, there's the question.
Right.
Is it gonna be, does the board want to set a rate because you play football and the expense of football? I don't put our volleyball team in any of that equipment, right? I just we give them a uniform.
Yeah.
So it's obviously more expensive to run a football program.
It
So is the board gonna be looking at one size fits all, doesn't matter what you play as a number? Or if you play volleyball, it's X, and if you play, do you see what I'm saying? So there's different impacts to different sports. Now, we can also use football as an example. It has one of the best gate fees that you actually get revenue
Mhm.
better than basketball, things like that. So there are revenue generators. That's why the line item shows around 500,000 as a quick estimate. Because then you're applying the revenue down to get the true expenditure. It costs us around, again, a solid number, around $250,000 a year for all of our extracurricular activities. Big portion of that comes from transportation, right? I've heard from a lot of parents, even this year with us not having drivers, right? It's been an impact. Heck, what I just spent in fuel, I would have been my levy cost times 3, right? And so, it would have been an easy try. I would have much rather just had the levy go through because I would have saved money. Probably the case for sure. Fuel prices stay where they are.
Like, yeah.
So that's what I want you guys to obviously think about is, hey, we want a whole number. We want to divide that number to be X. And then the number is going to be fluid because if you only get 20 kids for a certain sport, and you thought there'd be 30. See what I mean? It may grow because we don't know all of those particular numbers. And there may be so cost impacting that some can't afford it. So are you willing to scholarship?
To decide to increase fees beyond what we've been doing is keeping it at 75%. The method behind that madness is because we will be required to go to separate public hearings.
Hey, Becky, just a quick question.
Establish what that might look like.
What does the sports fee pay for?
Extracurricular activity.
Okay, so I mean, like,
Coaches, referees,
It's collected
some gear.
and categorized by activity.
okay, per school or per,
Sure.
okay. So like, so the money that comes from the gate, where does that,
Same place, it's not designated for anything in particular other than the activities at school.
so the gates
We
at
have
the
summaries.
specific locations go to the specific location?
The extracurricular budget is allocated based on the communities, those being Clearwater Valley. Basically, you have a different grade structure there, where 6 through 12 are housed, whatever it is. 7 through 12 are housed at one site. So it's basically just Clearwater Valley High School.
Mhm.
At Grangeville, you have 2 buildings, but it's allocated per community
Mhm.
because it covers those same 6 to 12 students. So they have to work together. So what I'm saying is the allocation, the budgeting, and the reporting that follows is driven from that model. And every year in your annual fiscal year and June 30th report, that summary is included. In fact, the last one, so it's not just the current year, it goes back to all priors. So it's not broken out per activity, although we can get that for you if you want to dive that deep. Your school secretaries can do that. But looking at it from the overall point of view, everything that's raised in a Clearwater Valley school for their activity fees and for their gate receipts, their donations, which is separate fund for donation. It's not part of the M&O expense, but everything at Clearwater Downs is.
All right, I'm gonna exercise my prerogative during this last literal minute that we have for this meeting and ask the board, do we want to meet more often? We basically have set up a schedule that's on the door and that we meet twice a month, once for a workshop like this and once for a regular meeting, at which we may not, we'll probably have other things to discuss besides figuring out this budget. So what I want to ask is, do we want to meet more often for workshops than once a month? I would suggest we meet at least every other week, but I'm open to suggestions.
Particular things that we need to tackle and not opposed to taking meetings for those particular things, but
Just take the next one at CD.
The next board meeting is the 21st here at the district office. It says district office, probably going to be here. They'll have public comment that particular day. So anyway, I'll plan it for here in the library again. It seems to be best suited for. Yeah.
With respect to what you thought.
I just have meetings to have meetings.
No, well, no, I agree. I'm
think
just
we need to be
saying.
more
I mean,
prepared when we come
there's-
to meetings. I just think we need to be prepared when we come to meetings with the information that we're supposed to have.
All right, then we'll leave the schedule as it is. And I think we're adjourned. Thank you.